The night was supposed to be a celebration, a small break from the usual grind. I had been looking forward to it, a chance to unwind, enjoy some good food, and, of course, show off Lauren, my wife, to my colleagues. We'd been married for 7 years, and though things hadn't been perfect lately, I still loved her. I had arranged for a nice outfit, a tie that matched hers, and even made sure to get a new suit that would help me make a good impression in front of my boss, Ryan Sullivan. Ryan was the kind of man who commanded respect. At 40, he was everything I aspired to be: wealthy, confident, and someone who seemed to get whatever he wanted. I'd been working under him for years, and though he could be a bit of a show-off, I respected him. But tonight something felt off. Lauren and I arrived at the rooftop venue in downtown New York. The skyline glittered behind us, the lights of the city stretching as far as the eye could see. I could hear the sound of laughter, glasses clinking, and music drifting through the air. We mingled with a few colleagues, sipping drinks and exchanging pleasantries. But Lauren's behavior started to catch my attention. She was being unusually flirtatious with some of the men at the party, lingering a little too long in their conversations, her laughter too loud, her touch just a little too intimate. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was just the atmosphere. Everyone was a bit more animated at a party. But the more I watched, the more I felt a growing discomfort. I excused myself to grab another drink from the bar, and that's when I saw him. Ryan, standing at the center of the room, talking to some of the senior managers. His eyes briefly met mine across the room, and then, as if on cue, he walked toward me. His confident stride seemed to part the crowd effortlessly. "Adam, my man," Ryan said, clapping me on the back. "Glad you could make it. Enjoying the party?" "Yeah, it's great," I replied, trying to shake off the strange feeling that had been gnawing at me since we arrived. "Good crowd, good drinks." Ryan nodded, his eyes flicking over to Lauren, who was deep in conversation with one of the junior guys from marketing. I noticed how his gaze lingered just a little too long before he turned back to me, smiling like a man who knew something I didn't. "Hey," Ryan said, his voice lowering slightly, "I've got a little surprise for you tonight." I raised an eyebrow, curious but also slightly wary. "What do you mean?" He smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was sharp, almost calculating. "You'll see. Don't worry about it. Enjoy the evening." Before I could ask anything else, Ryan turned on his heel and walked away, leaving me feeling oddly unsettled. I watched him as he moved through the crowd, his presence almost magnetic. The man was always the center of attention, and everyone seemed to gravitate toward him. But it was Lauren who had caught my eye again. She was laughing too loudly now, touching the guy from marketing's arm just a bit too familiarly. I could feel a knot tightening in my stomach, but I tried to shake it off. The music shifted, a slow song playing now, and the crowd thinned slightly as people paired off. I glanced around, looking for something to distract myself, and that's when I noticed Ryan walking toward me once more. This time he had something in his hand. A small, rectangular envelope. He stopped right in front of me, his eyes glinting with amusement. "Here," he said, holding it out to me. "A little gift." I was confused. I took the envelope, not really sure what to expect. When I opened it, I saw what looked like a set of black lace panties, a pair I instantly recognized. They were Lauren's. My stomach dropped. Ryan grinned at my stunned expression, leaning in so only I could hear. "Don't wait up for her tonight," he said, his voice dripping with malice. "She's going to be with me." The world seemed to freeze for a second. I couldn't even process what he had said. My hand clenched around the envelope, and I looked down at the panties in disbelief. Inside, tucked neatly, was a crisp $100 bill. The room fell silent, the music cutting off as if by some unspoken cue. I stood there, frozen, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Ryan's eyes were on me, waiting, his expression one of victory, as if he had just won some kind of game. But I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. Instead, I slowly bent down, picked up the money, and slipped it into my jacket pocket. I felt the eyes of the entire room on me, waiting for me to lash out, to make a scene. But I didn't. I straightened up and looked Ryan in the eye, my voice steady, almost calm. "Thanks for the reminder," I said, my words cold and deliberate. Ryan looked momentarily stunned, as if he had expected me to shout, to lose my temper, to cause a scene. But I didn't. I just turned, walking away from him toward the elevator. Behind me, I heard the hum of the crowd starting to buzz again, people pretending to continue with their conversations, though I could tell they were all waiting to see if I would explode. I didn't. I was done with this game. I wasn't going to let them control me, not tonight. The elevator ride down to the parking garage felt like the longest one of my life. The steel walls around me felt like they were closing in, and my mind raced with thoughts I couldn't quite make sense of. I wasn't angry, at least not in the way I thought I should be. No, this wasn't a fit of rage. This was something more calculated, more deliberate. As the elevator doors closed, I focused on my breathing, trying to keep my pulse steady. I couldn't believe what had just happened. The man I worked for, the man I respected, had humiliated me in front of my colleagues. But that wasn't what bothered me the most. It was the cold realization that Lauren had been lying to me for months. That Ryan had been playing his game for months. The $100 bill was a clear message, but it was just the beginning of something bigger. I arrived at my car, parked in the far corner of the garage, and sat there for a moment, staring at the dashboard. My heart rate began to slow, and as I sat in the silence, I allowed myself to feel everything I had pushed down during the party: betrayal, hurt, confusion. But I couldn't let it take over. I couldn't afford to let my emotions rule me now. I pulled my phone from my pocket and checked the time. It was already well past midnight. Lauren had sent me a text earlier saying she would be at a friend's house and might come back late. But something about her message seemed off. At a friend's house seemed like a vague excuse, one that she had used before. I felt the pit in my stomach grow deeper. I couldn't just sit there and stew in my thoughts. I needed to act, to find the truth, to make sure I wasn't just imagining things. I opened up my notes app and started typing. I had to make a plan, something methodical. If there was one thing I knew, it was that I couldn't let chaos consume me. After a few minutes, I sent a message to Jake, the lawyer I had been referred to by a friend. Need to meet, I typed. Tomorrow morning. Urgent. I stared at the message for a few seconds before hitting send. There was no turning back now. I knew I needed legal advice. I had to protect myself. No, us, but mostly me, because Lauren had already chosen her side. The drive back home was a blur. I was hyper-aware of every detail: the neon lights on the streets, the quiet hum of the car's engine, the way the city seemed to be oblivious to the storm I was carrying inside. By the time I got home, I didn't know what to expect. I had no idea if Lauren would be there or if she would be at Ryan's, but I couldn't ignore what had happened. I stepped into the house, and a strange silence greeted me. The lights were dimmed, and there was no sound of movement. No clinking of dishes, no faint hum of the TV in the background, nothing. It was almost as if the house was empty, though I knew Lauren's things were still around. Her jacket was hanging by the door, her slippers next to the couch. But no Lauren. I walked through the house, checking the rooms as I went, trying to find her. The bedroom was empty. The bathroom was empty. Finally, I found her phone on the kitchen counter. My breath caught in my throat. I wasn't proud of what I was about to do, but I needed to know. I picked it up, unlocked it with the password she had conveniently forgotten to change after years of marriage, and began scrolling. Messages. Tons of messages between her and Ryan. No wonder I had never suspected anything. She was good, too good at hiding it. There were casual texts at first, small talk, work-related things. But as I scrolled further down, the messages grew more intimate. Compliments. Inside jokes. Complaints about me, about our marriage. It was sickening to read. Then I found the one that made my stomach twist. A message sent just a few hours before the party. Ryan, I can't wait to see you tonight. Adam will never know. You're everything I need. I felt like I had been slapped across the face. My hands were shaking, but I kept reading. Just a few more weeks and we'll have it all. I can't wait to be with you, Ryan. Don't worry about Adam. He's too busy at work to notice. My mind spun. I didn't know what to do next. Should I confront her right now? Should I call Ryan and make it all end? But then I remembered the $100 bill. The humiliation. Ryan's smug smile. He wanted a reaction. He wanted me to fall apart. But I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction. Instead, I turned off her phone, sat it down on the counter, and stared at it. I wasn't going to let them control me. I had the power now. I needed evidence, and I needed it fast. Tomorrow I would meet with Jake. I would gather everything I could. But tonight I was going to take a step back. I had to think. I walked into the living room and sat down, allowing the silence to settle over me. It was going to be a long night, but I knew this was just the beginning. There was no more hiding. No more pretending. I wasn't going to just be the man who was betrayed. I was going to be the man who took control of this situation. And I was going to do it right. The next morning came too quickly. I didn't sleep much, my mind constantly racing through every conversation Lauren and I had ever had, every small detail I had overlooked. But I didn't dwell on it. I couldn't. I had already made the decision. This wasn't just about revenge or an emotional outburst. No, this was about taking control of my life. I woke up early, showered, and put on the same suit I had worn to the party the night before. It felt like armor, a constant reminder of the man I was now. Calm. Collected. Intent on handling this situation with precision. By 9 a.m., I was sitting in a small office across from Jake, a divorce attorney with an unflinching reputation for handling tough cases. He was in his mid-40s, sharp, professional, and to the point. I had never met him in person before, but after a few phone calls, I knew I could trust him to guide me through the mess I had found myself in. Jake sat across from me, sorting through a few papers. I could tell he had already reviewed the details I sent him. He had a way of looking at you that made you feel like you were being analyzed, carefully, methodically, as if every word you said mattered. "So, Adam," he began, his voice steady but firm, "I've read through your messages and the timeline you sent. The situation is, well, it's as bad as you feared." I nodded, my throat tight. I had already known this, but hearing it aloud made it more real. Lauren had crossed a line, and Ryan had made it his mission to humiliate me in the worst way possible. "Are you ready to go through with this?" Jake asked, looking me in the eye. "Because once we start, there's no turning back. We'll file the paperwork, request a formal investigation, and from there, things will get messy." "I'm ready," I replied. "I need this to be over. I need to take control." Jake leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping on the desk as he processed my words. "All right. The first thing you need to know is that this isn't just a divorce. You have grounds to report Ryan for misconduct. What happened at the party with the public humiliation is important. But we need more. We need evidence. Your next step should be gathering more proof. I assume you've already started?" I took a deep breath. "I've got the messages, the texts between them. And I'm planning to collect more, anything I can get my hands on. I need to know just how far this goes." Jake nodded. "Good. Keep gathering evidence. Photographs, texts, anything that shows a pattern. If you can get audio or video evidence of conversations between Lauren and Ryan, that will strengthen your case. But don't confront them directly yet. This is still a delicate phase." I nodded, mentally taking notes. I wasn't sure how far I could push this, how much I could dig without tipping my hand. But I couldn't just sit back and wait. I had to act. "One more thing," Jake said, looking at me with a more serious expression. "Once you've gathered enough evidence, we'll file a report with your company. Sexual harassment, abuse of power, that's a serious claim. And it won't be easy to disprove. Ryan will fight back and Lauren will likely try to deny everything." "I'm prepared for that," I said, feeling a surge of determination. "But this isn't just about the company or my marriage. It's about taking control of my life again. About not letting them continue to play me like I'm some fool." Jake's eyes softened for a moment, and I saw a flicker of understanding. "You're not a fool, Adam. And you're right. You need to stay calm. Focus on the facts, the evidence. Emotions won't win this fight." I stood up, shaking Jake's hand firmly. "I'll start collecting more evidence today. Thanks for your help." Jake gave me a slight nod, his voice steady. "Take your time. The more you gather, the better. But remember, we'll need to move quickly once we have everything. Don't waste time, but don't rush either. Be strategic." As I walked out of his office, I felt a strange mixture of anger and relief. The weight of the situation hadn't disappeared, but now I had a plan. Now I knew what I had to do. It wasn't going to be easy, but I wasn't going to back down. The next few days were a blur of calculating my moves and gathering more evidence. I kept my distance from Lauren, pretending like everything was normal. Every evening I'd quietly check her phone, searching for more texts, more proof of the affair. The more I found, the angrier I became, but I kept it in check. I couldn't afford to make a scene. I wasn't going to be the emotional wreck. I was going to be the man who took control of his future. On the fourth night after the party, I found what I needed. There was a text from Lauren, sent just hours before the party, to Ryan. It was simple but damning. "Can't wait for tonight. Adam's oblivious. You're so good to me." I didn't need anything else. This was it. I had enough to move forward. The following morning, I met with Jake again. I handed him my findings, texts, photos, even the recorded conversation between Lauren and Ryan I had managed to secretly record. The look on Jake's face told me everything I needed to know. We were ready. "Okay, Adam," Jake said, his voice low and focused. "We have everything we need. It's time to make our move." I felt a sense of finality wash over me. This was it. No more games. No more pretending. This was the moment I would take control. And there was no going back. The day had arrived. Everything had led up to this moment. I had collected the evidence, I had secured the legal backing, and now it was time to confront the people who had betrayed me. But not directly, not yet. I wasn't going to make the mistake of falling into their trap. I had learned that much from the night of the party. Lauren hadn't come home the previous night, which was no surprise. It had become routine for her to stay late, at work or visit friends on the weekends. I'd seen the pattern for the past few months. She was avoiding me, pulling further away as Ryan moved in. But tonight I knew she would be back. She couldn't stay away forever. I spent the day at work, keeping my composure, making sure no one suspected what I had planned. Jake had told me to stay calm, to keep my cool, and to wait for the right moment. I was playing a long game now. A game that would end with my hands clean and my future intact. When I walked into the house that evening, I was met with an eerie silence. The same silence I had come to associate with Lauren's absence, though this time I knew she would be there. Her jacket was hanging by the door, her shoes neatly placed by the hallway. I wasn't sure what I expected to find, guilt, an apology, or even a fight. But I was prepared for whatever came next. I made my way through the house, deliberately not looking at the kitchen or the living room. I didn't want to let on that I knew anything yet. Lauren was sitting in the living room, her legs tucked beneath her as she watched some reality show on TV. She looked up when she heard me enter, her face softening for a brief second before she quickly masked it with a forced smile. "Hey," she said, her voice too sweet, too rehearsed. "How was your day?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I walked over to the kitchen, grabbed a glass of water, and took my time. I wasn't going to rush this. I needed her to feel like everything was normal, like I hadn't figured it all out. But every moment that passed, I could feel the tension growing in the room. I turned back to her, still calm, still collected. "It was fine," I replied. "Busy but manageable." Lauren nodded as if nothing had changed. But I could see the slightest twitch in her eye, the nervous glance that betrayed the calm exterior. She was already trying to cover up the truth. But I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of asking questions. Instead, I walked past her, straight to the dining table where I had left the envelope earlier, the one containing the $100 bill and the black lace panties. I picked it up slowly, deliberately, and turned around to face her. Lauren's face paled instantly, her lips parting in surprise. "What is that?" she asked, her voice unsteady. I didn't answer. I placed the envelope on the table in front of her, letting her look at it. "You tell me," I said, my voice flat. She didn't speak for a moment, her eyes darting between the envelope and me. I could see the panic building in her, the realization that everything was about to come crashing down. I stayed silent, letting her process it. Finally, Lauren took a deep breath, as if gathering the courage to lie her way out of it. "Adam, please," she started, her voice trembling. "I didn't want you to find out this way." I raised a hand, cutting her off before she could spin her story. "I know everything, Lauren," I said, my tone cold but steady. "The texts, the phone calls, the lies. You've been seeing Ryan, haven't you?" Her face twisted, and she stood up quickly as if to flee from the truth. "It's not what you think." "Don't lie to me," I interrupted, my voice sharpening. "I've seen the messages. I've heard the conversations. You're not fooling anyone, Lauren." Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. The truth was too much for her to handle. For a moment I felt something, anger, betrayal, but not the kind of raw, uncontrolled rage I had expected. No, this was different. It was a quiet, calculated fury, a resolve that I had built piece by piece. I continued, my voice steady and unwavering. "I know everything about you and Ryan. I know it's been going on for months. And you know what? I'm not angry. Not anymore. But this ends tonight." Lauren's eyes flickered with panic. "Please, Adam, I'm sorry." Sorry?" I echoed, shaking my head. "You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry you didn't cover your tracks better. But you're not sorry for what you've done." She backed away slowly, her eyes darting to the door. I could see her mind racing, trying to figure out a way to escape, to hide. But she couldn't run from the truth. Not anymore. "Lauren," I said, my voice more forceful now. "I'm done. I'm done with the lies. I'm done with the deceit. I've made my decision." She stopped backing away and turned toward me, her eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and desperation. "You don't mean this," she whispered. "You can't. We've been together for so long." I nodded, my gaze never leaving hers. "We were together, Lauren. But that was before. Before you chose to betray me. Before you chose him." For a moment we stood in silence. It was like the weight of everything had finally settled in. The years of marriage, the trust we once had, now reduced to dust. I could see the regret in her eyes, but it was too little, too late. I turned away, walking toward the kitchen again, giving her space to come to terms with her actions. I knew this wasn't the last conversation we'd have, but I wasn't going to let her manipulate me anymore. I wasn't going to let her play the victim. The next steps were already planned. The divorce, the legal proceedings, the evidence. I had already taken the necessary steps. Now it was just a matter of watching everything unfold. Watching her realize that I was no longer the man she could control. As I poured myself another glass of water, I heard Lauren take a few shaky steps toward the door, but I didn't turn around. There was nothing left to say. The days following that confrontation were surreal. The house felt emptier, quieter, as if everything that had been holding it together had finally unraveled. Lauren's attempts to reach out to me were met with nothing but silence. She tried calling, texting, even leaving notes on the kitchen counter, but I didn't respond. Not because I hated her, though I felt the sting of betrayal, but because I needed to stay focused. There was a plan to execute, and I wasn't about to let her emotions throw me off track. I continued my daily routine, keeping my distance from her. She stayed out late, spent more time with friends, and when she was home she kept to herself. I could feel the walls closing in on her, though she tried to act like nothing was wrong. But it was. Everything was wrong. And she knew it. Meanwhile, I kept my focus on the bigger picture. The evidence I had gathered, messages, recordings, photos, was enough to bring Ryan down, and eventually, it would be the catalyst for my divorce. But it wasn't just about ending my marriage. It was about ensuring that Lauren's actions had consequences. I couldn't let her get away with this, and I wouldn't let Ryan think he could humiliate me without paying for it. They both needed to understand that their actions had real-world ramifications. I met with Jake again, this time at his office, where we finalized the divorce paperwork. It was a sterile, professional atmosphere, the complete opposite of what I had imagined my life would be like just a few months ago. Jake looked over the documents, ensuring everything was in order. "You're in a strong position, Adam," Jake said, pushing the final draft of the divorce papers across the table. "We'll file this, and with everything we have on Ryan, it's unlikely he'll try to challenge it. But remember, the next steps will be crucial." "I'm ready," I replied, my voice calm but with an edge of certainty. "Let's move forward." Jake nodded, his expression serious. "Good. I'll start preparing the submission for the company's HR department as well. Once the divorce is filed, we'll send them everything, photos, recordings, the messages. We're in a good place to have Ryan removed from his position. He won't be able to weasel his way out of this one." I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. This was happening. I was doing what needed to be done, and I wasn't going to allow anyone, least of all Ryan or Lauren, to make me feel powerless again. The days that followed felt like a slow build-up to the inevitable. Lauren's behavior grew more erratic. She started apologizing more often, trying to re-establish a connection between us, but it was too late. I was no longer the man who would sweep her mistakes under the rug. I wasn't the man who would turn a blind eye to her lies. She had chosen her path, and now she would have to face the consequences. Then came the phone call I had been expecting. Jake informed me that the board at Sullivan Auto Repair had agreed to an emergency meeting regarding the allegations against Ryan. They had reviewed the evidence I submitted, and based on the strength of the case, it looked like Ryan's days at the company were numbered. "Are you ready to make it official?" Jake asked me when he called. "The HR department is going to launch an investigation, and they'll need your full cooperation. Ryan won't see this coming." "I'm ready," I replied again, my voice steady. "Make sure they know everything. Let him know he's not untouchable." The next few days were filled with legal meetings, phone calls, and paperwork. I remained calm, letting everything unfold as planned. Lauren stayed distant, and I continued to document every interaction. She'd become almost unbearable to be around, trying to manipulate the situation by playing the victim. But it didn't matter anymore. I had control, and nothing was going to derail this. Then, the moment I had been waiting for came. Ryan was officially called into the HR office for an emergency meeting. I knew that this would be the turning point, the moment where his smug confidence would break. He would be forced to face the truth, and it wouldn't be pretty. I kept my distance, but I couldn't help but watch from afar. I saw Ryan leave the building later that day, his face pale, his usually confident stride replaced with a slow, defeated walk. The news traveled quickly throughout the office. Ryan Sullivan, the man who thought he was untouchable, had been fired for sexual harassment and misconduct. The board had acted swiftly, and his reputation was ruined. The feeling of satisfaction was almost surreal. It wasn't the kind of victory I expected. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt a quiet relief. Justice had been served. But it wasn't just Ryan who was going to face consequences. Lauren came home that evening, her face drawn, her eyes searching for answers. She had heard the news about Ryan, and she knew it was only a matter of time before she would be forced to face the truth as well. "Adam," she started hesitantly, her voice trembling. "I don't know what to say anymore. I'm sorry. I made a huge mistake. Please just stop. I cut her off. My voice was firm. It's over, Lauren. It's been over for a while. I'm not interested in your apologies anymore. What you did, what both of you did, it's unforgivable. And you're going to have to live with that. Her face crumpled, the facade of control slipping. She stepped closer, her eyes desperate. Please, Adam. I'll do anything to fix this. We can start over. I love you. I shook my head slowly, looking at her for the first time without the cloud of love or confusion. I didn't see my wife anymore. I saw a woman who had made choices, and now she had to deal with the consequences. You don't love me, Lauren. You love the life you had, the comfort, the security. But love? That's something different. And you gave that up the moment you chose him over me. She collapsed onto the couch, her body shaking with sobs, but I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for her. Not anymore. I had been betrayed. I had been humiliated. But I had taken control, and in the end that was the only thing that mattered. I walked away from her that night, not with anger in my heart, but with a sense of finality. This was it. The end of a chapter and the beginning of a new one. The weeks that followed were both a blur and a slow, deliberate march toward something new. Something that felt far more like the person I had always wanted to be. The divorce proceedings were underway, and the emotional weight of it all had settled into a quiet routine. Lauren tried everything she could to reach me, apologies, promises, even attempts to rekindle some semblance of affection, but I remained resolute. I wasn't going to let her back in. I wasn't going to fall for her manipulation anymore. By the time the final papers were filed, I felt strangely detached. The woman I had loved for so many years was now a stranger to me, a shadow of the person I thought she was. She moved out of our house a few days later, her belongings packed into boxes, her presence slowly fading away from the home we had shared. There was no confrontation, no dramatic farewell. There didn't need to be. She was leaving and I was done. In the days that followed, I focused on myself, on rebuilding my life. I made small changes, moving some furniture around, painting the walls of the living room a shade of blue I had always liked but never dared to pick. I threw out things I didn't need, clearing out the emotional clutter that had accumulated over the years. Every small step felt like a victory, even if it was a quiet one. But even as I tried to make peace with what had happened, there was one lingering thought that wouldn't go away. Ryan. I hadn't heard much from him since his dismissal. The gossip around the office had died down, and the whispers faded. But I knew Ryan. I knew he wasn't the kind of man to go down quietly. He wouldn't just accept defeat. And somewhere deep down I knew there was a storm brewing. I had been prepared for the aftermath of the affair, for the fallout of the divorce. But I wasn't prepared for the way Ryan would attempt to make me pay for exposing him. He would come back, I knew that much. And when he did, I would be ready. A month passed in relative peace with no signs of trouble. My new role at the company was going smoothly, better than expected actually. The repair department had seen an uptick in efficiency under my leadership, and the company board had taken notice. I wasn't sure where my future would take me, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control over it. Then one afternoon while I was at my desk, the phone rang. It was Jake, and his voice immediately caught my attention. Adam, I've got some bad news, he said, his tone serious. I felt a tightness in my chest. What's going on? I asked, bracing myself for whatever he was about to say. Ryan's trying to make a comeback, Jake replied. He's reached out to some of your colleagues, telling them his side of the story, trying to paint you as the villain. He's trying to turn the tables. I closed my eyes for a moment, fighting the sudden wave of frustration. Of course he is. What's he planning to do? Jake paused. He's planning to go public. Word is he's talking to some journalists. It's not a direct attack yet, but it's coming. I took a deep breath. How should we respond? Jake's voice remained steady. We need to be prepared. I've already filed a response with HR, but I'm advising you to gather anything else you can. This isn't over, Adam. Not by a long shot. Ryan's going to fight for his reputation. And he's willing to drag you through the mud to do it. I nodded even though Jake couldn't see me. I'll take care of it. Just keep me updated. As soon as I hung up, I knew I couldn't let this escalate. Not after everything I'd been through. But I also knew I couldn't allow Ryan to slander my name, to spin the narrative that he was the victim here. I had already lost so much. My marriage, my peace of mind, my sense of security. I wasn't going to lose my reputation to someone like him. The next few days were filled with frantic preparations. I started reaching out to colleagues who had witnessed Ryan's behavior, asking them to provide statements if needed. I reviewed every scrap of evidence I had, texts, recordings, emails, anything that could serve as a defense against Ryan's accusations. I even hired a public relations firm to help craft a statement should things escalate into the media. I couldn't let Ryan control the narrative. I couldn't let him twist the story to make himself seem like the wronged party. This was my life and I had the right to tell my side. It wasn't long before I got my answer. One morning I walked into the office to find a pile of emails sitting in my inbox. All from various news outlets. One subject line caught my attention. Exclusive. Scandal at Sullivan Auto Repair. Ex-managers fall from grace. I clicked on it, heart pounding. The article was everything I had feared. It painted Ryan as a misunderstood figure, a man who had been wrongfully dismissed, who was now facing a smear campaign led by his former colleague me. It wasn't a direct accusation of the affair, but it was close enough. The story made me look like the one who had overstepped, the one who had caused the downfall of a good man. Ryan had spun everything to make me the villain. I felt the blood rush to my face. But I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing me react. Not yet. I called Jake immediately, my hands gripping the phone. "It's happening," I said, my voice low but intense. "He's going public. He's already planted the seeds." Jake's tone was calm, but I could hear the urgency in his voice. "We'll fight back. You need to stay calm, Adam. Let's put together a response. We'll expose his lies. We're not letting him turn this around." I took a deep breath, letting his words settle in. "I won't let him destroy everything I've worked for." Jake was quiet for a moment. "Good. Then let's show him that you're not the one to be messed with." I spent the next few hours piecing together a response. Every word mattered. I knew the media would be watching, waiting for any slip-up. Jake was right. Ryan had started a war, and now it was my turn to respond, carefully, methodically, without letting my emotions take control. I began drafting a statement, one that was direct and factual. I made sure to include everything: the timeline, the evidence of Ryan's misconduct, and the proof of his inappropriate behavior toward me and the company. But I also knew that this wasn't just about clearing my name, it was about making sure Ryan could never recover from this. It was about showing everyone the man behind the mask. I knew I couldn't do this alone. I reached out to my trusted colleagues who had witnessed Ryan's behavior firsthand. People who had seen the uncomfortable, inappropriate interactions he'd had with both the staff and me. They were hesitant at first, but when I explained the situation and showed them the evidence, they agreed to stand with me. Over the next couple of days, I gathered their statements, carefully compiling the pieces of a much bigger picture. Ryan had been abusing his position for months, if not years, and now the truth was finally coming to light. Jake and I went over everything carefully. He made sure to adjust the language in my statement to ensure it was legally sound, free from any personal attacks or emotional outbursts. This was a battle of facts, not feelings. We needed to keep the focus on Ryan's actions and not let him paint me as the aggressor. Once the statement was ready, we sent it out to the press. I knew this would be the first wave in the counterattack. It was time for the world to know the truth. For the next few days, the media was abuzz with the fallout. The initial article Ryan had planted was quickly overshadowed by my statement and the corroborating evidence. News outlets picked up the story, and it wasn't long before Ryan's own colleagues began to speak out, confirming what I had already said. The truth was being laid bare for everyone to see. But it wasn't just the media that was responding. The company's HR department launched a full investigation into Ryan's conduct. The board, which had initially been hesitant to act, now had no choice but to take decisive action. A meeting was called and Ryan was invited to attend. I didn't need to be there to know what was going to happen. This time he wouldn't be able to talk his way out of it. His arrogant smile, his manipulative charm, none of it would save him now. While the investigation played out, Lauren reached out to me again. Her calls had been more desperate than before, each one pleading for forgiveness, for us to talk. She tried to convince me that Ryan had used her, that she was under his influence, that she was sorry for everything. But I wasn't interested in her apologies anymore. They felt hollow, like words she had practiced but didn't believe herself. One evening she showed up at the door, her eyes red, her face blotchy from crying. She stood there, trembling, her hand outstretched as if asking for something I had long since taken back. "Adam, please," she whispered. "I need you to understand. I didn't want this to happen. I was confused. I made a huge mistake, but you have to know that I never wanted to hurt you." I looked at her, really looked at her, her face full of regret, but it was too late. It had always been too late. I had seen the signs, ignored them for far too long, hoping that things would get better. But they never did. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I let the silence hang between us, heavy with everything we had both lost. Finally I spoke, my voice steady, calm. You made your choice, Lauren. You chose him over me. And I chose to walk away. I'm not the person you left behind. And you're not the person I thought you were. I'm sorry, but there's nothing left for us here. Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't flinch. I couldn't. Please, she whispered. Just give me a chance to fix things. We can start over. We can. No, I interrupted, shaking my head. I've already started over. And I'm not looking back. She stood there for a moment as if she couldn't believe what I had just said. But when the silence stretched too long, when the reality finally hit her, she turned and walked away. I didn't feel the crushing weight of sadness or anger that I had expected. I just felt empty. But not in a bad way. It was like a weight had been lifted from my chest. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. The next morning, Jake called me with good news. The investigation into Ryan was complete. The evidence was irrefutable. Ryan's actions had led to his dismissal from the company, effective immediately. The board had made sure to distance itself from him, and a formal statement was released to the press confirming his firing. Ryan's reputation had been obliterated. His arrogance, his lies, none of it mattered anymore. He was done. I felt a strange sense of closure as I read the company's statement. Ryan was finished. And Lauren. Lauren was gone too, in more ways than one. The world had finally seen the truth, and there was nothing left for her or for him to hide behind. But there was still one more thing left to do. One last piece of this puzzle that had been waiting for the right moment. I called my lawyer again, and this time the conversation was different. This time, we discussed the next steps in the divorce, finalizing the settlement, moving forward with the paperwork. Lauren had agreed to the terms, though she still tried to make small concessions here and there, trying to keep something from the past alive. But I was done. Completely done. The day the divorce was finalized, I took a deep breath. It wasn't the closure I had imagined, but it was something more important. Peace. I was free, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally in control of my own future. As I stood outside the courthouse, I looked up at the sky. The sun was setting, casting a soft orange glow across the horizon. I couldn't help but smile. Life had a way of forcing you into corners, making you question everything you thought you knew. But in the end, it was your own choices that determined the path ahead. And I had chosen to rise. The weeks after the divorce were both liberating and challenging. There were moments of peace, and moments where the weight of what I had been through came rushing back in overwhelming waves. But each day I felt myself getting stronger, more centered. The emptiness that had followed Lauren's departure began to fill with something new, hope. Hope for what was to come. Hope that I could rebuild a life that was entirely my own. Work had become a place of focus. I threw myself into my responsibilities, leading the repair department with a quiet confidence. The transition was seamless. My promotion had been well received, and the team responded positively to my leadership. I wasn't just managing repairs, I was managing people, building something new, something that had nothing to do with the past. Every small success reminded me that I had the power to control my future, and I wasn't about to waste it. But it wasn't just work that filled the void. I began to reconnect with old friends, people I had lost touch with over the years while my attention had been consumed by a failing marriage. There was something cathartic about sitting in a diner with friends who had seen me through the highs and lows of life, laughing at old memories and talking about what came next. They had always told me that I deserved better, but I never really understood it until now. I had spent so many years trying to fix something that was never going to work. But now, for the first time in a long time, I was truly myself. One night, a few months after everything had settled, I found myself sitting at a bar after work, nursing a whiskey and staring into the amber liquid. The bar was nearly empty, the low hum of conversation in the background a comforting presence. As I sipped my drink, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting another email or text from work, but it was a message from an unknown number. "Hey Adam. It's Sarah. From HR." My heart skipped a beat. Sarah Johnson, the HR director who had been involved in the investigation against Ryan, had been one of the few people who had quietly supported me throughout the whole ordeal. She had always been professional, but her kindness had not gone unnoticed. I quickly opened the message. "I know this is unexpected, but would you be interested in meeting for dinner? No work talk, I promise. Just a casual dinner. I've been meaning to ask, and I think it's time." I stared at the screen for a few seconds, uncertain of how to respond. It had been so long since I had felt anything like this. Someone genuinely reaching out, someone interested in more than just business or obligations. But I wasn't about to ignore the potential for something real. I had spent too long avoiding my own desires, my own needs. It was time to start saying yes. I typed a quick response. I'd like that. When? How about tomorrow? 7 p.m. at Vino's? I smiled, feeling the faintest flutter in my chest. Vino's was a local Italian restaurant, small and cozy, the kind of place where the food was as good as the atmosphere. It had been ages since I'd gone out for a simple dinner, and the thought of not being alone for a change felt oddly comforting. Sounds perfect. I'll be there. The next evening I arrived at Vino's a little early just in case. The hostess led me to a quiet corner table, and I sat down, the anticipation of seeing Sarah creeping up on me. I had no idea what to expect from this dinner, but I knew one thing. It wasn't going to be anything like the past few months of quiet solitude. There was something about Sarah's message, the way it felt open and unforced, that gave me hope. When she arrived, looking as poised and confident as I remembered, I stood to greet her. She smiled warmly, her eyes twinkling in a way that made something inside me shift just slightly. "Good to see you, Adam," she said, her voice calm but friendly. "It's good to see you too," I replied, holding the chair for her as she sat down. We spent the first few minutes making small talk, catching up on work, on life, sharing some lighthearted moments. But soon the conversation turned more personal. Sarah asked about how I had been since everything went down with Ryan, and I found myself telling her things I hadn't shared with anyone. I told her about the struggle of the divorce, the weight of losing a partner, the process of reclaiming my life. She listened quietly, offering soft words of understanding when I needed them. It was easy with her. Comfortable. In that moment, I realized how long it had been since I'd let someone truly see me, without the walls I had built to protect myself. Eventually the conversation shifted and Sarah shared a bit about herself. She told me about the challenges she had faced at work, the pressures of her role, and the difficulty of maintaining her professional boundaries while dealing with the chaos that had surrounded Ryan's downfall. But through it all, there was an unmistakable strength in her words, a quiet resilience that I couldn't help but admire. We didn't talk about work after that, and it felt right. We talked about music, movies, the things we enjoyed doing in our free time. It wasn't the most profound conversation, but it was real, and it was a reminder that life didn't have to be all business and obligations. As the night drew to a close and we stood outside the restaurant, Sarah hesitated for just a moment before looking at me with a warm smile. "I'm really glad we did this," she said. "I've wanted to get to know you better, Adam. You seem like a really genuine person." I felt a mix of emotions, surprise, relief, and something else I wasn't quite ready to name. But it was enough to make me take a deep breath and look her in the eyes. "I'm glad too," I said. It feels good. To just be myself again." We exchanged numbers, and as I walked back to my car I realized something important. For the first time in months I didn't feel alone. The road to healing wasn't easy, but it wasn't as lonely as it had been. And for the first time in a long time I felt like I was moving forward. That night I didn't feel the weight of my past pressing down on me. Instead I felt the excitement of what lay ahead, of possibilities, of new beginnings. And as I drove home I couldn't help but smile. Maybe the road was long, but I was ready for whatever came next. It wasn't long after that dinner with Sarah that I began to feel the stirrings of something more. For the first time since everything had fallen apart I was opening up to someone. Someone who wasn't just a colleague or a distant acquaintance, but someone who seemed to genuinely care. And as strange as it felt at first, I realized that I was starting to look forward to the moments when I could see her again. We met a few more times over the next couple of weeks. Each time the conversations grew deeper and the connection felt more natural. There were no expectations, no hidden agendas, just two people who had been through difficult situations, learning to trust again. I could feel myself letting go of the walls I had built over the past year. Sarah's presence was a reminder that life could still surprise you, that despite the hurt and the betrayal, there was room for something new, something real. As much as I tried to keep my emotions in check, I knew I was starting to care about her. And for the first time in a long time it felt right. She made me laugh, she made me think, and she challenged me in ways that were refreshing. With her, I felt like I could be myself, fully, without the weight of my past decisions weighing on me. One evening, about a month after our first dinner, I found myself sitting across from her at the same restaurant. It had become our place, a spot where we could talk about anything and everything, and tonight the conversation was no different. But there was a subtle change in the air. It felt like something was about to shift. "Adam," Sarah said, her voice quieter than usual, "I've been thinking about everything you've been through, and I just want to say, you've handled it all with a lot of grace. I admire that." I looked at her, surprised by her words. It wasn't the first time she had complimented me, but something about the way she said it made me feel a warmth I wasn't used to. I was used to being the one to handle things quietly, to keep my feelings locked away, but hearing her acknowledge it made me realize how much I had grown. Grace. I chuckled softly. I don't know about that. I've made a lot of mistakes. But I guess I've learned a lot through it all. About myself. About what I want. She smiled, her eyes locking onto mine. What do you want, Adam? The question caught me off guard. I hadn't really stopped to think about that in a while. I'd been so focused on getting through the pain, on putting one foot in front of the other, that I hadn't considered what I truly wanted. I had spent so long living for someone else's approval, trying to fix my marriage, trying to salvage something that was already broken. But now I had the opportunity to rebuild. I want peace, I said, my voice steady but sure. I want a future where I can breathe again. Where I can move forward without the weight of the past holding me back. There was a long pause between us, and in that moment I could see it. I could see the understanding in Sarah's eyes, the quiet respect she had for the path I had walked. It was as if she was seeing me for the first time, not the man who had been betrayed, not the man who had fallen, but the man who had picked himself up, piece by piece, and was moving forward. I want that for you too, Adam, she said softly. You deserve to be happy. To find what makes you feel whole again. Her words lingered in the air, and I felt a shift inside of me. It wasn't just about recovering from the past anymore. It wasn't about the pain, the mistakes, or the failures. It was about the future I could create for myself. It was about the possibilities that lay ahead, with no one to hold me back, no more lies, no more deception. The rest of the evening passed in a quiet, comfortable silence. It wasn't awkward. It wasn't forced. It was the kind of silence that only comes when two people truly understand each other. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. After dinner, as we stood outside the restaurant, Sarah turned to me with a soft smile. Adam, I know we've both been through a lot. But I think we could help each other. We've both learned things about ourselves. And maybe there's more to this than just a friendship. I met her gaze, my heart beating a little faster. The way she looked at me, so open, so honest, I couldn't help but feel something stir inside of me. Something that had been buried for so long. I think I'd like that, I said, my voice low but sincere. I think we could help each other too. As we said our goodbyes that night, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not just hope for a new beginning, but a deep belief that the future could be better than the past. That there was still love, still possibility, and still joy waiting for me. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't afraid to embrace it. The next few months were filled with new challenges, new growth. Sarah and I continued to see each other, slowly letting our relationship blossom into something deeper. There were no rushed decisions, no unrealistic expectations. Just two people who had been through the ringer, learning to trust again, learning to build something from the ground up. And as the seasons changed, so did I. I was no longer the man defined by betrayal or failure. I wasn't the man who had been broken and discarded. I was someone new, someone stronger, someone capable of facing whatever the future held with open arms. I'd learned the hard way that life wasn't about avoiding the pain. It was about how you dealt with it, how you rose from it. And I was rising. With Sarah by my side, with the lessons I had learned, and with the clarity I had gained, I was ready to face whatever came next. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I knew I was walking it with purpose. And that was enough. As the days passed, I realized something important. This was no longer about getting back at anyone or reclaiming what was lost. It was about building something new. And not just with Sarah, but with myself. I had spent so much time trying to piece together a broken past, but now I understood that the only way forward was to embrace the future, with all its uncertainties and possibilities. Sarah and I continued to grow closer, but our relationship wasn't rushed. It wasn't a fairy tale that needed to be forced into some perfect narrative. We were two people who had been through heartbreak and betrayal, who understood what it meant to be vulnerable and raw. We didn't rush into things because we were both realistic. Time was something we had in abundance. And with that time, we built a foundation of trust, respect, and a deep, quiet affection that neither of us had expected but both welcomed. At work, life was equally fulfilling. I had fully embraced my role as the manager of the repair department, and the results were beginning to show. The team was thriving, customers were happy, and the company had begun to take notice of my leadership. The weight of the past was fading into the background, and I could finally say that I was doing something I enjoyed, something that gave me a sense of pride. One afternoon, I received a call from the company's HR department. It was Sarah, and her voice was calm but serious. Adam, I need to talk to you. It's about the Sullivan Auto Repair quarterly meeting next week. The board wants to formally acknowledge your efforts in the department and how things have turned around under your leadership. They're offering you the permanent position of department head with a salary increase. I could hear her smile through the phone even though her tone was professional. It was a significant recognition and I had worked hard for it. But it also felt like more than just a career milestone, it felt like validation. Like everything I had been through had finally led me to a place where I could stand tall and proud. "I'll accept," I replied, my voice steady. "But I want to make sure I'm not just taking this position for the title. I want to keep growing, keep improving things. I want to lead, not just manage." Sarah laughed softly. "I thought you might say that. They're offering you a chance to take the reins, Adam. And they trust you." The words felt good. They felt right. For the first time in years, I felt like I was in control of my life, in control of my career. And it wasn't about proving anything to anyone else, it was about proving it to myself. A few days later, I walked into the boardroom, ready to face the decision that had been waiting for me. The board was filled with familiar faces, some new, some old, and the energy in the room felt different. There was a sense of respect that hadn't been there before. Ryan's shadow was long gone, and with it, the toxic atmosphere that had once ruled the office. I took my seat at the front of the room, feeling the weight of the moment, but I wasn't nervous. This was my time. My opportunity to show everyone, including myself, that I was capable of more than just surviving. I was capable of thriving. The board acknowledged the challenges the department had faced, but they also recognized the improvements I had made. We discussed the future of the repair department, the goals for the upcoming year, and the strategies I had put in place. It wasn't just about fixing cars anymore, it was about creating a culture, a team, and a vision that could stand on its own. And with their endorsement, it became clear to me that this wasn't just a job anymore. This was my legacy. After the meeting, Sarah came up to me with a smile that reached her eyes. "Well done," she said, her voice filled with admiration. "You earned this, Adam. I'm proud of you." "Thanks," I replied, feeling a mix of gratitude and pride. "It's not just me though. It's the team. We're in this together." But as we stood there, I realized that Sarah's words meant something deeper now. It wasn't just about the job or the promotion, it was about the person I had become. I wasn't the man who had been blindsided by betrayal. I wasn't the man who had been left behind. I was someone who had taken control of his life, piece by piece, and built something meaningful from the ground up. That evening, Sarah and I celebrated. We had dinner at Vino's again, sitting at the same quiet table in the corner. We talked about everything, our future, our hopes, the things we wanted to accomplish both individually and together. And as the night drew to a close, Sarah took my hand across the table, her touch warm and familiar. "Adam, I'm glad we found each other," she said softly, her eyes locking with mine. I smiled, feeling a sense of peace wash over me. "Me too," I said. "I never expected to find this, but I'm grateful I did." It wasn't a perfect ending, there would always be challenges ahead, obstacles to overcome. But for the first time in years, I felt ready for whatever came next. The past was behind me, and the future stretched ahead, filled with possibilities I hadn't allowed myself to see before. And for the first time in a long time, I knew that I was walking into that future with the right person by my side. We didn't know exactly where the road would take us, but we were ready to walk it together. The world was open to me now. And I was ready to embrace whatever came next, knowing that I had already survived the worst of it. It was time to thrive.